Oh, we are going to now move into our election coverage, and we're going to be joined here momentarily by Michelle Klampe, one of our education reporters out of our Temecula office. She is joining us by the telephone. Michelle, how are you this morning?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty well for a late night.
Excellent. Good. Well, you had a number of three kind of school board races in Southwest County, Menifee Union, as well as Perris and the Romoland School District boards up for election yesterday. Let's start with Menifee. That one appeared pretty interesting. I believe it was for 2 seats on the board, 1 incumbent and 1 re-election. And that's Bob O'Donnell. Tell us how the results were. What were some of the big issues? What kind of surprised you? I know a lot of people might be interested in kind of wondering about Scott Mann. I believe he's a former council member for the city. Usually, oftentimes in the traditional realm of politics, people will start off on school board, then move from there up to city council, then maybe to the county board of supervisors, and then on up. Here he's going back, going for the school board. What's kind of the takeaway from the Menifee Union School District election yesterday?
Well, it's interesting because there were 2 seats up for election, and one of the incumbents, Bob O'Donnell, won his seat pretty handily. And then the second winner was Scott Mann, who beat Rita Peters, the other incumbent, for that second seat on the board. And it does seem a little unusual for someone who was once a city councilman to go back and join a school board, except for the fact that Scott used to work for the school district and was actually a casualty of layoffs in the school district a couple of years ago. So he's very familiar with the Menifee School District, and he knows a lot of the players there, and a lot of people know him. He worked as the district's risk manager, so he was involved in a lot of employee relations and things like that while he was serving there. But Scott, I had a chance to talk to him on the phone last night, and he said he thought one of the things that worked really well in his favor is that he spent a lot of time walking neighborhoods in the school district boundaries and made a lot of phone calls to friends. He lost his bid for re-election to the city council a while back, but he has stayed active in that community and has definitely, I think that showed here in the election. He I think had 5 points over Rita, the next runner-up in that race.
Right.
So.
I would suspect that because he's a former council member, he had some built-in name recognition that probably helped him as well.
Absolutely, yeah, and he's been, like I said, he's been around, and it wasn't that long ago that he was running for city council for re-election. So he's well known in the community. He has a lot of existing name recognition, and then it sounds like he put some footwork into it as well. And one of the issues that he raised in the campaign, and I think one that probably resonated with some voters given the climate today in politics, is this election was actually scheduled to be held a year ago, last year, and the school board a couple of years ago decided that just because the school budget situation was so challenging and there were so many unknowns, that they thought that they would be better off to postpone the election and the cost of the election for a year while they figured out where they were financially. And Scott was one of the people who raised in this campaign that really he didn't think the board should have done that the voters should have had a chance a year ago to decide who they wanted to represent them on the board. And Rita Peters was one of the ones who was in favor of postponing the election for a year. So I know that Scott kind of hammered that hard when he was talking to folks about the community.
And when school districts or city councils or water districts do that change, it basically extends the term for another year for the incumbents, which it can oftentimes be controversial. So the incumbents got another year off their existing term because of that delay.
Exactly. So.
Right. Okay, we're going to move on and talk briefly here about the Romoland School District. Give us a rundown, how many candidates were up there, how many seats were up for election on the board, and were there any key issues that kind of dominated that race?
Sure. The Romoland race, Romoland is a small K-8 school district that's kind of between Perris and Menifee and overlaps a little bit in both of those communities. But this was an interesting race because there were none of the incumbents ran for re-election.
Okay.
So there were 2 open seats and there were 4 candidates running, and all newcomers to the political spectrum. And the winners in this race were Sandra Toussaint, who is a parent and volunteer and who also works occasionally as a substitute in the classrooms as a substitute teacher's aide or classified aid. And the other winner was David Sperry, who's a real estate agent in the community. And everybody in this race pretty much said the same types of things. All of them said, they really have time now to give back. They're in a position to work in the community, and they're interested in making sure that, the kids have what they need in that community. Pretty much everybody was focused on, raising academic achievement and ensuring that the students, teachers, and administrators have the resources they need. It wasn't a particularly controversial race, but one of the things that's interesting about it is with these two new board members, this is a wholesale turnover of the school board in Menifee. Another board member in Romoland, another board member resigned over the summer, so they have one new board member who was appointed in September, and now they have these two new board members. So come December, when everybody's sworn in, they'll have 3 new board members and 2 existing board members.
Right.
And that comes at a time when Romoland has had a lot of changes in that school district. They have a new superintendent who's been there just a year. They have a bunch of new administrators, including a new school principal and a new assistant superintendent. So I think that folks in Romoland seem ready to, embrace some changes and move forward in that district and really see where they can go. Their test scores have been improving. They're getting ready to build a new middle school. So there's a lot of things going on in that district.
Right. With all new members on Romoland and a new member on the Menifee Union, did any possible, and this was kind of on the surface in some races up in Riverside as well, but was there any discussion about merging of some of these school districts, like the high schools in Perris and in Menifee? Did that come up during the campaign?
It did. Unification is a hot topic in that area because all of these small school districts that had elections last night all feed into the Perris Union High School District. And there has been a lot of talk for several years, particularly about the Menifee School District taking on the high school, Paloma Valley, in that area and becoming a unified school district. The issue in all of these situations, and Romoland may do that sometime in the future, they have not talked about it as much as they have in Menifee. But the issue there is that there are a lot of requirements for school districts to meet before it's both financially viable and educationally viable to do such a merger, and the conditions have just not been right, and they've persistently not been right for several years. So the big issue right now for unification is that it's not financially feasible. School districts are really strapped for funds, and there are a lot of financial considerations in terms of how they divide debt for bonds that have been passed by voters in each district, how they square that out so that voters aren't paying for things in another district once the split is the merge is made. So everybody I talked to about unification said they're supportive of the idea. People like the idea of having all their elementary, middle, and high schools all in their community under one leadership, one administration, but they don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize the financial picture for their schools. So they're gonna play that one pretty conservatively until the conditions change.
Right. So, but you do suspect that it will still be an ongoing issue into next year and beyond.
Absolutely. Right. I think probably for at least 5 years down the road. Right. That's my best guess anyway.
Well, Michelle, thanks for joining us. And of course, Michelle, she covers education issues in Southwest Riverside County for us. And you can check out her stories on pe.com and in the Press Enterprise, and look for her follows on the Menifee and Perris and Romoland School District elections in the Press Enterprise on pe.com. Michelle, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
All right.